If somebody, let's say in the 1850s or 60s in Paris or London, wished to talk about or read about India or Egypt or Syria, there would be very little chance for that person to simply address the subject, as we like to think, in a kind of free and creative way. A great deal of writing had gone before. And this writing was an organized form of writing, like an organized science, what I've called Orientalism. And it seemed to me that there was a kind of repertory of images that kept coming up, the sensual woman who's there to be sort of used by the man. The East is a kind of mysterious place full of secrets and monsters. The marvels of the East was a phrase that was used. And the more I looked, the more I saw that this was really quite consistent with itself. It had very little to do with people who had actually been there.
This is Edward Wadio Said, the American Master of Arts, Doctor of Philosophy, and famous intellectual who coined the term Orientalism, which is known to be the racist view that the West or colonialists during the height of colonialism used to degrade the cultures of the so-called the East or Orient. This way, the colonialists could justify its destructive method of exploiting the resources of other land that they conquered by any means necessary without any consequences. And to be frank, Orientalism has been so widespread over the past century that it's very easy to accidentally create something and adhere to it. I know it sounds like reaching, because most of our view about the world throughout modern history has been directly taken off of Western media, which is taken off of Western policy that is causing so much atrocities and inequalities around the world. And I must remind you, they are causing, which means it is still happening to this day, because they have the grip of Western media and using it to spew Orientalism rhetoric. Yes, this goes full circle. And we can't just talk about this without mentioning the one example of the most detrimental effect of it all, Alan Kurdi. Unfortunately, I can't talk about it further, otherwise Papa YouTube saw this video the same way Andrew Cuomo saw Zohran Mamdani in every single mayoral debate as an Avengers level threat and nerfed this video to oblivion and not getting much views. So I really recommend you to look the story up for yourself. Just a warning that it's really graphic and depressing, but worth your time. At this point, it's easy to point fingers on beautiful masterpieces that unfortunately fall into the Orientalism bubble. Look at the game House of Ashes. It's an amazing immersive experience which tells the horrific tale of a group of US soldiers getting attacked by Iraqi soldiers and then ends up in a nest of these ancient monsters dwelling from the unknown, so they had to escape and survive this abomination. But the very Orientalist derogatory aroma is there. Aside from the lack of context from the world building and the mentioning of the Manhattan incident as an uncritical justification for war, there's this Iraqi character named Salim Uthman who's being depicted as someone who was forced to join the Iraqi army under Saddam Hussein, or else he'd be shot on the spot. And then later on, when he had a convo with one of the good guys, Jason, he mentioned the Manhattan incident, right, as a justification for the US invasion of Iraq. All this works as a character development of Jason. At no point Salim blasts onto him saying something like Iraq had nothing to do with it, or the US conduct this war under a fake assumption that Saddam Hussein had deadly chemical weapons and ties to Al-Qaeda. And so the whole story of the game is just another one-sided Middle East war where the US will always be on the good side. Another good example is the groundbreaking popular adult show Blue Eye Samurai. I enjoy this series as it is. At times it managed to show the very realistic and gritty takes in the crazy world of 17th century Japan and during the height of colonialism, which is also around the same time when Orientalism starts to spread. But unironically, the trace of it is there. While I'm not really knowledgeable in Japanese history, it is pretty much publicly known that 16th to late 17th century Japan is very contrast to the depiction on this series. Japan wasn't a downtrodden dystopian medieval society where sexual immorality and violence was all around, where the technology are so far back that they relies on European colonial gunsmiths for firearms. Like no, it's the exact opposite actually. But the most goofiest projection of it all is when there's a samurai wedding ceremony and the dishes being served on the bride is like this raw, reddish meat served with horse semen. Like dude, that is just the most bullshit. Recently, there's a Hollywood produced show took place in 18th century Hawaii that surprisingly views the Hawaiian people and its culture as not less. So this is Chief of War. It's based on a true story of King Kamehameha of the Kingdom of Hawaii as he went on a journey to trying to unite the entire Hawaiian Islands under one banner. As someone who are obviously tired of Orientalist depictions of other cultures as barbaric, lustful, and seem so culturally inferior to the West, this show not once have that perspective. It does depict the brutal reality of Hawaii when war was the norm, but there are nuances. The terrible Hawaiians committing massacres under the rule of King Kamehameha was the few bad apples that somehow got massive military support from sheer luck, while King Kamehameha and his senate had to carry the weight of this whole disunity. The protagonist of the show is Ka'Yana, who is King Kamehameha's chief of war, and he is pretty much the living moral compass. He used to work for Kahekili, but because he has done too many murders, eventually leading to a feeling of disgust of any conflict, and so he cut ties with Kahekili and sided with Kamehameha. Even then, with the Brotherhood, across all 9 episodes, there are still internal conflicts between both goofballs, because while Ka'Yana later on became someone with a vision to do anything necessary to bring the Hawaiian kingdom together, not counting the consequence, just like his former boss King Kahekili, Kamehameha is someone who is soft-hearted and just and doesn't want to attack its enemy first and always prioritize defense and the safety of the people. This creates a very lengthy and emotional character dynamics and rendering the end goal of the unification of all Hawaiian Islands to be impossible. As I'm trying to find some bits on how historically accurate the show is, hoping to find at least some flaws in the story, I ended up coming across this piece that exactly encapsulates my thoughts about Chief of War as a whole. Early depictions of Hawaii were mostly designed to sell it as a tourist attraction, but even more recent depictions have been held back by Hollywood whitewashing Hawaiians. Films like Lilo and Stitch and Moana have made strides towards better representation, but Chief of War with its cast, budget, and full support from Apple is something else entirely. And you got to appreciate the amount of effort the show has. It took around 10 years for the script to be written in the Hawaiian language, or Olelo Hawaii, which is unfortunate that most of the cast doesn't speak it, including the main actor Jason Momoa himself, despite him being raised in Hawaii. This is because, sadly, Olelo Hawaii is an endangered language, with only 24,000 speakers left, unlike its distant cousin, Basa Jawa sing doapro lagi saiki iku basa sing duweni swidak yuta penutur kalebu atusan diaspora saka Asia Tenggara nganti Amerika Selatan. I'm sorry, but I had to show up there. But that's what makes the show special. Every single cast has to undergo hours and days of learning the Hawaiian language. The result is, of course, authenticity. Most of the dialogue in the show is spoken in Olelo Hawaii, with some English here and there. And of course, the on-set location depicting the Hawaiian nature and architecture is also notable. Therefore, please watch Chief of War. It's one of its kind series that just done everything right. The culture, the dynamic, the ambience. I'm so satisfied finishing this show. Anyway, if you enjoyed this lengthy non-spoiler review, then leave a comment and like. If you want to support the channel, then feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you later. Peace.